met with the executive director of a global partnership for sustainable development data. So I think we're going to hand the microphone to Maryann first.
Wonderful, thank you very much. What I'd like to talk about, it echoes a lot of what was said by Dr. Walker and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, is what makes this project so unique is the fact that it is done with people with lived experience of poverty. They're telling you their experiences and the knowledge that they gain from their life experiences. Because poverty at its core is a lived experience. You have to live it to understand it. You can study, be an academic, an economist. I'm not trying to insult anybody, sorry. But the knowledge that you gain from it is different. As Robert said, the life skills that you learn just to survive day to day is different than something that you would read in a book. Just like people with lived experience of poverty know the difference between how policy works on paper and how it works in actuality. What needs to be done to improve it based on what they've gone through dealing with that, and how to improve it to make it better. So that's why this research is so important, based on everything that we've come up with so far. The one thing that we've always talked about is, when you talk about dimensions of poverty, is cause and consequence. Some dimensions are viewed as the causes of poverty, like if you don't have a good education, you might go into poverty. Our education is the number one way to get out of poverty. But with the group of people that we were working with, the academics, people with lived experience of poverty, and practitioners, they all agreed that everything could be a cause and a consequence. When you really sit down, you look at it and you discuss it and think about which way it can go. And the one thing that they came up with was subjugation would be the only thing that is a definite cause of poverty. And the way we defined that was having power over people, systematic oppression of a dominant section of society over another group, which ends up being into the criminalization of poverty, which is some of the things Robert talked about, and Jeffrey Sachs talked about earlier. And the way that the people that were in these peer groups and that people with poverty, they described it as being at the bottom, or being under the thumb constantly. And how that can make you self-isolate, or you suffer in silence because of the way that you were treated, that Jeffrey Sachs said, they are the problem. Or Robert said, they are the problem. And people do internalize that. And if we didn't have people with lived experience of poverty in this project, we would not know all these things. So it's echoing everything that they talked about. But the one point that I want to make clear is that in order to do this, it's not people only finding their voice and being able to speak. Some people feel the weight of poverty so much that you can't speak because you know that people don't want to listen to you. But the people that have found their voice and can't speak for themselves, comes more down to no one cares. Or no one listens, or my voice is unrecognized. It's not that I don't have it, it's unheard, or it's unrecognized. And in order for that to be heard and to be recognized, people have to have a seat at the table to be here. In groups like this, in other research. And the way that you do that is to make accommodations for people, because life is hard for everybody. But if you live in poverty, as like Robert was saying, the jobs that you have, the way you're treating in your job, if you're holding 2 or 3 jobs to try to support your family, the way that you're treated every day, maybe in your neighborhood, or just the oppression of segregation or subjugation, you have to make accommodations for people. When we started this project, we had 9 people on our team. But unfortunately, 2 people had to drop out because life happens, is what we always say. One person due to illness, that from the healthcare system, from living in poverty, their life and ill health that causes for people. And another one just because of life issues, wanted to be part of this work and was offering wonderful information based on their knowledge and insight, but they just weren't able to continue. And I think that's one of the most important things is that in order for people to be at the table, you have to make it accommodating for them too. Not only at the table, but to work with people to find out the differences of it. The one thing that I wanted to talk about is that Jeffrey Sachs talked about the idea of poverty and extreme poverty. And you might say, and Robert pointed out, global north and global south. A lot of times people say, well, why is developed countries involved in this project? And not realizing there's extreme poverty here too, in developed countries. And you may say countries have more than the other ones, but the way people feel can be the same. The one thing that we've noticed is when we were talking about subjugation with people, in Appalachia, they talk a lot about being shunned and being the outcast of society, that even if it's not you personally that is looked down at that, but the whole family is being shunned because of the way maybe they view, not who you are, but who you are perceived to be, do you know? And I think that's similar with what, as Robert said, the tiger widows in Bangladesh, that they're being shunned because of who they are perceived to be. And that comes back down to subjugation, of how people are being treated and how it snowballs over a period of time. The one thing too that we've also talked about is the anger some people feel. Yes, some people are very happy, you know, they find strength in spirituality and it helps them get them through. But a lot of people also feel anger because, why am I being treated this way? Because of who I am perceived to be. And the word resilience comes up a lot, but in actuality, a lot of people don't like that word, because the idea of, they describe it as, I go through all these things in life, you keep throwing things at me, and if I bounce back, then I'm considered resilient. But if I can't bounce back, then it must be my fault. It must be a character flaw. It must be because I have low morals, or I can't just take the pressure of it. And that's a lot of what we were discovering just by working with people in poverty, that there's labels that are put on people. You're the poor person, you're the other, you're this. But even like labels that some people would consider positive, like resilience, you know, it's still a label that people define, because it comes back to identity of how you were defined yourself, opposed to how other people define you. And that all comes back to that we would never discover this otherwise if there weren't people with lived experience of poverty doing this research, contributing, sharing their knowledge based on their life experiences, working with practitioners that work with them every day to see the hurdles they have to go through, the hoops they have to jump through just to sustain their families or to sustain themselves, and the academics that also know the research and can go back and forth and compare it and put it into labels and into categories to define it. Okay, sorry. Thank you very much for your time and your interest.